to another episode of Coconut Chats. I am Chris Malika Bhadra, and I am today or tonight, that depends on whichever part of the world you're listening to us from. I'm joined by my very good friend and co-host, Shomita. Shomita, how are you doing?
I'm good, Chris. How are you?
Not too bad. Thank you, Shomita. Today we have a very special guest with us on a very special topic, which is non-verbal communication or conversation. And we are joined by Ms. Madhumita Dasgupta, who's joined us all the way from India. So a bit about our guest before we get the conversation rolling. So Madhumita Dasgupta, or MD, as we would be referring to her during the course of the conversation. MD has masters in history and is a mainstream school teacher of humanities subjects in different schools in the country for over a decade. And she moved on to doing a bachelor's degree in special education and joined the Indian Institute of Cerebral Palsy, IICP, in Kolkata, India, and has been working as a special educator for 12 years now. Her area of interest and study is children with complex communication needs, which is also abbreviated as CCN, in a special school environment and mainstream environment. A teacher in residence awardee at the Bridge School in California, US, she also spent 8 months working with and getting trained in strategies and pedagogical studies of augmentative and alternative communication with children having speech difficulties and CCN. On that note, MD, very, very good morning to you. How are you doing?
Good morning to both of you. I am doing really well now. Hi to everybody all over the world. So,
yeah. Thank you, MD, and thank you so much for joining us. All right, let's just get into the conversation. First, we would like to know a bit about your role in IICP.
Well, my current role in IICP is that of a coordinator. So I'm the coordinator of the IT unit. We have an ICT unit in IICP. It's again almost a 50-year-old organization, IICP is. So there's an ICT unit in which there is the National Resource Center for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. I mean, we call it Roshni. So I'm a coordinator there, and I'll come to that later. Then I'm also a coordinator for we have a Jugnu Play School and Nutrition Program where we cater to children coming from the nearby slums of the below poverty level, children without disabilities. I mean, as in children without visible disabilities, let me put it that way. And that. Then we also have this wonderful, it's called the Disha School Readiness Program, which is actually run by the government of India. And IICP has been given that job by the National Trust, which is again a government of India enterprise. This is again for children with visible disabilities coming from the below poverty level. So I kind of coordinate all that. Of course, I also take writers' workshop sessions in the school unit of IICP, and yeah, pretty much I think all my fingers in the pies. So yeah, that's what.
Yeah, we will just move on to the speech impairment part of the discussion, MD. So we'll start with the basics, like what is speech impairment for our audience?
Okay, so impairment, of course, would mean there is an inability of using speech. So it's as simple as that, I would say. But it becomes a disability when, due to speech impairment, the child finds it difficult to get across what they are saying. So, and see, again, speech impairment can occur due to a lot of reasons. It could occur due to, your movements of the tongue or, the teeth and all of it. But it will also occur because of there's a difficulty in understanding, comprehending what you're saying, what the person is saying to me, or in terms of I could be having an intellectual difficulty. I could be also being someone who's had a stroke recently, or I could be having dyslexia. I could be having autism. So in terms of how I'm comprehending what you're saying and how I'm trying to figure out, my brain is trying to figure out what I should be coordinating in my self, in the head or in the mouth, all of it, and saying things which make sense to you is what would be a speech impairment.
Okay. I have a question related to this. So, as you have come across many types of reasons behind the speech impairment, so is it always the child is born with it, or can this be induced by some abuse or trauma or in early childhood? Have you seen any cases like that?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are cases, of course, of children being born. I won't say being born with speech impairment, as in, because see, again, it's a okay. Let me just take it to cerebral palsy. You know, when I learned about cerebral palsy, and you have so cerebral palsy again is a balance. You know, there's a difficulty in balance. You know, your movement, and because of some lesion in the brain. But it's very interesting that it's not just the balance which gets affected in terms of the walk, but because of the wires which are so close to the, and I think of it very simplistically this way, but because the wires are so close, so it affects something or the other, like a ripple effect. So if I have cerebral palsy, I might or might not, it might or might not affect my speech. It might or might not affect my walk. It might or might not affect my cognition. So speech impairment, again, it could be something which has happened because of certain issues with the brain or issues with birth. But it could also occur because of, as I said, now if I have a stroke today, my speech will get impaired. If I also have, I understand that, okay, I have dyslexia, my speech is going to get impaired. Now, a lot of it happens because of birth, due to birth, or rather during birth, but not always actually, you know. I mean, we've seen older people who, because of dementia or other issues, kind of
Yep,
gradually stop speaking. You know,
that's right.
there's a speech impairment which has happened. So that's what I meant.
Before you follow on, Shobita, I have a follow-up question, MD. You know, you spoke of speech impairment, whether it's a toddler, a child, or someone who's unfortunately suffered a heart attack and as a result of it has a speech impairment. Speak from rehabilitation aspect of things. Which one is more difficult to rehabilitate back to normalcy? A young child with speech impairment or an adult individual who's had it due to a heart stroke?
Okay, so first of all, I think I'll just like deviate this a little a bit to understanding communication. You know,
Sure.
I think I would not be doing justice if I don't speak of communication, which is the entire umbrella. So speech happens to be, actually, if you really think of it, speech happens to be just one part of communication. Now, since we're talking of children, and we also spoke, and you also mentioned the entire range of children to adults and all of it.
Yeah.
So when a child is born, there are these milestones, you know, developmental milestones that we see, and how is the child communicating? Of course, we lay a lot of emphasis on speech, but really it begins with crying. We all know this, right? So anyway, the child has begun communicating. Now, as the child grows older, what happens is parents get children to early intervention centers and also the doctors, let's put it that way. Only when we see that the child is not saying ma and baba, like as in ma, mom and dad or whatever is what comes first to the child. Or if there's any other thing that you notice, or mother notices. But even there, we always, in our assessments, we try to understand what is it that the child is communicating. I mean, okay, speech hasn't happened as yet, but the child is definitely communicating. And that goes for each of us. If you really think hard, I might not be speaking to you. And yet there is so much of communication that all of us do. And now, of course, it's the age of the digital age. So we are constantly communicating, and there's hardly any time for anybody to talk. So now coming back to the fact that, is it easy or not? Offering interventions, I'll always say early intervention with children is the time you're supposed to start. But having said that, it does not. So, for example, I think it's very wrong on my part as a special educator to tell a parent who comes with a child with a person who's, say, 15 years old or 22 years old and has been dealing with autism or has been dealing with other challenges, because clearly, you know, speech is not happening. Okay, something else is happening. You keep thinking that. But even if that person comes to us at 15, 16, 22, whatever, it's again, in that way, it's early intervention for them. But yeah, when the child is small, you actually can work on the parents. You can suggest a lot of things, because this child is just born or has been a few months old or maybe a year old, 2 years old, and you can introduce a lot of opportunities, you know, the settings that you have to create so that the child is propelled to speak, or let's say communicate. You know what I mean? As the child grows older, there's already a whole lot of things which the child has gone through. A lot
Right.
of settings the child has gone through, family dynamics, a lot of it has already happened. But if I think of communication really, then probably it becomes that way easier.
Right.
Then you're working on communication. What is the child communicating? Is he so basics? I mean, toilet, water, hunger. These, is the child communicating that? Then wow, doing it. And then of course there are tons of ways to do that. We can talk of that later on, I guess.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Chris?
No, carry on.
Okay. Yeah, probably we are already into the second part. So I was about to ask what are the different types of speech impairment you have noticed? So
I think I kind of, as I just mentioned. So there are
yeah.
Because of cerebral palsy affecting speech, that's one thing I would definitely speak about. Children with cerebral palsy, but then of course there are a lot of children who come to us with autism. I haven't as yet dealt with any child with dyslexia with speech impairment, but there are though. Okay. Yeah, that's about. And then of course the ones who are older, as I said, who've had a stroke or something. Yeah. In fact, there was this lovely girl, who came to us. She passed away sadly though. She was studying in a mainstream school. A wonderful, vivacious girl. Okay, I mean, coming off from a well-off family, she used to play hockey and just play games and had friends and all of it. This was in class 7. She was in grade 7 when she had fever suddenly, very high fever, and that's when she lost her speech. So when she came to us, and there were other issues, of course, when she came to us seeking help in augmentative and alternative communication methods, and we were doing the assessment, it was literally starting from the scratch. I mean, trying to figure out exactly what would the child be liking to talk about, what is it that the child wants to communicate. So, it's pretty much, I think, it's quite a wide range. But cerebral palsy, again, we have a lot of children with issues with that because of, not so much because of the cognition. Some of them are bright, I mean, brighter than me and all of us put together probably. But it's because of the, oral muscles and all of it. But autism, a lot of issues with speech. Kids.
Yep. So as you have already mentioned that augmentative and alternative communication is what you are focusing on. So do you want to put some more light into that?
I think I'll begin with this wonderful quote, which when I was a student, I kind of heard, and this is, of course, by Dr. Sudha Kaul, the one who's the founder, vice chairperson of IICP, and her friend Anne Warwick. This was again years ago when Anne Warwick apparently got, I mean, I'm saying apparently because I was not in IICP then, but Anne Warwick got AAC to India. So Dr. Kaul happens to be the pioneer of AAC in India. So AAC is a broad range of communicative behaviors and methods which support and enhance communication for all who are unable to use speech as the primary mode of communication. So that pretty much covers everything and anything that you can think of when we need to communicate. So starting from body language and facial expressions and gestures, and of course now we text, all of it is AAC. But when we use it, it's no big deal because we are already using speech as a primary mode of communication. But the moment somebody who has issues with speech, as in understandable or decipherable speech, AC is like, that's something which is the tool of communicating. So that's what. Then of course, as I said, it's very interesting. I'm just kind of going to go back and forth on communication.
Yeah.
It's because communication again can be intentional, can be unintentional, can follow some linguistic pattern, might not follow linguistic patterns. If you actually think of it, that's what we all do. How many times do we in an informal conversation think of the syntax and all of it? We don't. We keep switching language. We go from this to that, back and forth. So I think there, if we work on the child's strengths and this entire assessment process which happens when our children come to us with speech difficulties, all of this comes in like so who is the child comfortable with? This entire assessment. What does the child like to talk about? How does the child communicate? How does the child get your attention? How do you get the attention? In a play, how does the child respond? So then you get an idea of exactly what is the child doing. Because speech, of course, has some kind of library of words. So if I'm going to work on this library of words, or as we call vocabulary or language, we have to understand the context. So I think AAC, when we think of augmentative and alternative communication, all this comes into play, you know, the social needs of the child, the functional needs of the child. And then you figure out, okay, then what is it that the cultural needs of the child? Like, for example, there are some places that people don't say hi or hello, and we actually say namaskar, or, you know, other things I'm saying, you know. And there are places where you use this as a good, you know, a thumbs up as a good, and there are other places which thumbs up means something else, you know. So it's actually quite interesting looking at communication if you don't just like, we can move out of that entire thing of rigidly looking at speech. But because we live in a world where speech is so important, I think it kind of becomes a challenge for the child who's trying very hard to speak, or at least is speaking and we are not understanding, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So from what you were saying, it sounds like that when you or any other educator is trying to help the child, so a lot of research has to be put into the where the child is coming from, background, and then educating the parents. So how in your like normal course, how you do that? So is there like a counseling session for the parents as well, or what happens there?
So we have an IICP, a multidisciplinary team, which works all the time. So when we start with somebody, a parent who's come with this little child or maybe a little older child for an assessment, they actually come, and the child cannot speak. Usually it happens when, see, children who come with cerebral palsy, which has affected their, you know, the entire way you look at them, you know, like their hands are very tight, or, you know, they can't move their body much or their head much, and the parent come to us. That's very interesting. When they come, then really they're not looking at communication. Forget speech. They're not even looking at communication. They're looking at my child. When will my child sit? When will my child walk? So really that time it's interesting. They're not even thinking of speech that time at all. My child doesn't sit. What do I do? My child doesn't, you know, do this. Then when the child sits, it's next is like, when will he talk? When will he say this? Okay, so we start with that. So we have this entire team which works. So whenever a parent comes with a child, parents, we have a social worker who works on this entire thing that we were discussing, of discussing with the parent, like, you know, finding out the background, the, you know, where does the parent stay, what is the entire dynamics which works. You know, is it a nuclear family, is it a joint family, who are there, and what kind of furniture is there in the house, what does the child do to, you know, move from one place to another, XYZ. And then you have a special educator who's going to then conduct the assessment with the child. And you have these tools. We have these tools, actually, forms. And there's a pragmatics profile, there's an AAC assessment profile, which comes, of course, much later. You have an early learning skills form, all of it, you know, like pre-literacy, literacy, pre-numeracy, all of it. So that's what the special educator does. And then you have the therapist who comes at the same time to sit and work on what is happening with the child. Because again, if you're expecting the child to sit and talk, or sit and do some work, is the seating all right? Is the positioning all right? Is the child sitting and eating? Because for us, most of our kids who come, the parents are like young, very young parents. You know, some of them are like 18, 19, 20-year-old young girls who just had a baby and they don't know what to do with it. And the child is lying and can't sit, and the parent is feeding the child with liquids. So figuring out all that. And then interestingly, again, speech is not the most important thing the parent is asking.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting if you watch that. But yeah, as I said, it's like a teamwork. So obviously that consistently happens. You can't, I mean, I can't think of any intervention program without discussing with the therapist or without discussing with the social worker. Because I could be saying 20 things in my head. And I used to do that, you know, when I first started work. Oh my God, I used to have these 45-minute sessions in my schedule. And I used to plan activities and stuff. And here's this child struggling with autism who doesn't sit. And I used to get so bogged down, and, you know, like when I used to meet the parents, I used to be like, really, like, what have you, it's been a week and what has happened? And like, this hasn't happened. And I remember Dr. Kaul telling me, and she's a parent herself, and that's the reason we have IICP today. I remember her telling me that, the parent just needs to know that you are there for them and it's okay. There's no rush. It's fine. The child hasn't done it today. It's okay. He doesn't feel like it. He's not up to it. So the point of making the child sit on the wheelchair or make him sit on the chair and put the entire lap tray, it will not always work, So it actually made me think. And if a parent, like Dr. Kaul is saying, then you kind of look at parents differently. So the social worker does that bit. That you could be rushing with your intervention programs and you've really planned up stuff and studied things and you've made all your activities ready. But well, it's been a bad day for the parent, it's been a bad week for the child, all of it. So yeah.
Before I move on, any questions from you, Chris?
Nah, all good.
Okay, yeah. MD, you have been with IICP for a long time. So compared to when you joined and when you see this space now, how far have we come with the help of modern technology, you think?
So again, it's interesting because technology, so there's my boss actually, she's the Deputy Director of IT, Shati Chakraborty. So Shati was the one who was working apparently. In fact, I was working on some project, some kind of a talk that she has to prepare for, in which, so she was in a multinational company and she's a economics, master's in economics and all of it, and a computer programmer when she came to IICP and she met one of the adult advocates of AAC. Okay, someone with cerebral palsy who was cognitively very bright. She passed away, Madhuri Kapoor passed away. So apparently, when she came and she met Madhuri, and Madhuri said, "Can you teach computers to us?" So that's when I wouldn't know exactly which year would that be, but that would be probably many years. I'm sure more than 25 years. I'm sure. So that's when it started, and there were many students. And then, they've all now in different places. Madhuri, of course, has passed away. There was Den. There were many others, And then again, oh my God, he used to use, Shati had introduced it, using the tongue switch. He used to use the tongue switch to communicate. You have eye blinkers, you blink your eye and you communicate, So it, of course, it started there. Of course, it has moved on, like we've moved ahead. But what has happened is we don't get so many children now. Honestly speaking, we don't get so many children with such severe difficulties now. Pretty much we have a lot of parents who don't like to get their children much. And also there are so many upcoming private bodies, and it's good that there are, but at times I feel that these intrinsic problems are not always looked after. There's a parent who's actually in a rush to get the child talking, walking, and all of it. So we don't get too many children with such severe difficulties who would be needing maybe a tongue switch like Den needed and other things. So what we do have, of course, a whole lot of children with speech difficulties owing to the factors I told you who come to us. And then that's how we introduce technology. So it could be, and now you have the smartphone, you have like everything. You have tablets and, you have apps and all of it, which is like all there. So that has happened a lot now. So, not with such severe difficulties, as in severe physical difficulties maybe, or neuromotor difficulties, but cognitive difficulties and learning difficulties and intellectual difficulties, children will come up with that. So yeah, we do have a lot of, we use tablets, we use the Avaz app, we use the Jello app, and we have some mid-tech, high-tech, a lot of low-tech, I believe in a lot of low-tech technology, which we use a lot of it actually. Yeah.
And just one question before we follow up, Shamita. You mentioned that these days you're getting a lot less in number of children than you were getting previously. Is it because other private bodies, as you mentioned, have opened up, or is it a general societal stigma that some parents might like to think of that, or if I take
No, it's both. It's both, it's actually both, because it's interesting when it's actually very interesting. I wouldn't say less children, I'm saying less children with such severe difficulties who need such, see, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You have this entire awareness of all the devices that we have today, which we all use, mainstream devices that we all use too.
Yeah.
But in terms of the stigma part remains. And it's interesting is that the higher you go up the economic ladder, You have these parents who really travel all over the world through Zoom, actually, not just travel physically, but through Zoom, and they're trying to figure out options for their children. And I don't know, this is my feeling though. At times I feel probably the core, like, for example, when I came from the Brit school, I would never think of introducing a Dynavox to my child in IICP or in Kolkata. Like, what support can I give with that? Like, the language is different, the pronunciations are different. I'm sure the battery backup, all of it is so different out here. I mean, I remember they had given us a lot of these step-by-step voice output devices, which are used pretty much like this lovely switches, small handy ones, and you record. If you'll have seen it, you all would know. And when I got, they had given us around 10 to 12, and we use them like really frequently. Quick voice output devices, which are wonderful. But then what happened was we didn't get batteries to support that, and these are very, I think, very basic logistic issues which work. So that's one. But yeah, I would say that there are a lot of these private bodies which have come up, which I think have they kind of, people do go to them in sense that they look nice, they like pretty fancy looking stuff. And it's very interesting when there was a time when I used to feel like, why, when I'm talking to this parent I met in a particular social gathering, and she's like, oh, okay, IICP, can you not see my child at home? And I'm like, but in IICP, we conduct the assessments, and it's like very thorough. I'm like, yeah, but in IICP, it's like, I feel my child doesn't need a wheelchair, my child. So it's that entire thing of also looking at IICP, but then it's way, we do a lot more work. We offer a lot more services than just like wheelchair assistance and all of it, So that again, I think that entire branding also times helps, and there are times when it kind of doesn't help.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I will move on. As till now, as you have already mentioned, that due to certain things, the speech impairment has been caused. So, and also you gave that example of the girl who was perfectly fine, and then one day she wakes up with a fever and she loses her speech. So all of a sudden, if someone faces this difficulty, what is the effect on that person's mental health? Is it only the speech gone? Is it like the whole person has changed?
My God, this is I don't know. Imagine yourself. Like I'm fine, and suddenly I, for whatever reason, I've lost my speech. Now, of course, with Hia, this beautiful girl. Oh my God, it was quite a thing for her parents also. All of it.
Yeah.
You try to figure out exactly. See, again, if you work on the assessment part, yeah. I mean, today, if my speech goes because of laryngitis, I'm pretty much going to be able to tell you that, okay, you know what? I like to listen to my favorite singer, Kishore Kumar, with some signals or with some showing a picture. I'm saying it it's as simple as that. But if due to a fever or due to a heart attack or due to some kind of dementia or something else, I have lost my speech. And there are several other factors which have happened also. If I'm cognitively bright, again, that will happen only after you assess and observe the person and talk to the parents. Then probably we are saved. We kind of know, okay, maybe the school and what kind of memories the child have, the things that the child likes, doesn't like, and you have all of it in low tech or in high tech. And you would train the child to use that to say what the child wants to say. But if there are other impediments which have happened because of which has caused the speech delay, which has affected cognition and comprehension and all of it, then of course you have to really work with the parents a lot, because here is a child who's sitting here, and there are times when the child will not be able to express how the child is feeling. But this I believe, and I honestly believe this, is that every child in a class, and I've seen this in the classroom, every child knows. I mean, think of us as children. When we were children, we had our own kind of shyness and awkwardness and gawkiness, right? And there were some in the class who were not like that. They were like very smart. So we knew where each of us, I mean, I would know as a person that, well, I'm scared or I'm shy or I can't speak in this manner. So every child knows that the child has a difficulty. I understood this when I remember when the Brit school team had come to visit us in IICP to see how we have gone ahead to implement the things that I kind of learned there. And we made a school visit to Heritage. Or was it Heritage? Some school. And the teachers, we were all discussing, we were visiting the classrooms and the teachers were trying to tell us, like, in this classroom, XYZ children have XYZ issues. Okay. And I remember after the visit, we had this discussion that, I think it's not required to tell, like, okay, like this child, and of course the teacher was helping us out, but well, this child and autism, that child has, XYZ. The child knows there's an issue. Nobody better than the child would know that there's an issue with me. Because, for example, for a child with autism, would know that there's an issue. Otherwise, why is my mom getting upset all the time? Why is the teacher constantly saying so many things to me? Why? What have I done? Right? A child with cerebral palsy would know that I'm constantly asking the same question. And we have this habit of, and I don't know if still, it's not there, but there was a time I used to feel, why are we talking so loudly? Nobody said that the child has hearing impairment. Like, can you hear me? What is this? Like, why this entire act? When you and I talk, would I be talking so loudly? You know what I'm saying? So I think, child, and I believe in it firmly. Every child knows that there's an issue with me going on. Because probably because of the responses we give, the child knows it. Now, I won't even say what it might be doing to that child's personality or the child's understanding of self. I'll be taking such, isn't it?
Yep.
Can be like knowing that there's an issue with me and putting a finger onto that, because now science is advanced, right? 20 years ago, we didn't have diseases that we could name, but now I've come up with diseases that we have a name on it. So don't you think that child needs that assistance to kind of know that, okay, this is what I am suffering from?
Absolutely. Absolutely. 210%. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Every child has a right to know what's happening. So again, that goes to the right to communicate. I need to know. It's very interesting. I was reading somewhere and I actually wrote this down, where Stephen Hawking is saying even more important than the freedom of speech is the freedom to speak.
Yeah.
I have it, but I don't know what, I thought it was such a powerful thing to say, So of course, every individual has a right to know what's happening with me and what's being done to me.
Right.
But then it suddenly can't happen. See, we belong to a culture, and I'm sure those of us who have had Indian upbringing would say that that's a good thing. And at times, I think it's not always a very good thing too. We have our parents or our teachers making decisions for us or saying things for us. I remember as a child, I would go to somebody's house and they would say, do you want to have rasgulla? And my mother would say, no, she's not hungry now. And in my head, I was like, but I do want to have at least one. I'm saying, and we do this unconsciously and obviously meaning well. It's, my child has been asked a question and my child shouldn't lose face in front of a stranger or a family member. So the parent takes over or the teacher takes over. But you've lost that, I think we lose that window where we haven't trained the child to actually say, well, okay, no, yes, say or communicate, I'm saying. So, of course, from there, the child, any child and every child has the right to know what is happening. And if it has happened to me, then what are you doing about it? How are you helping me?
Right.
So there's something in AAC when we do. So I'm talking of low tech, okay? When we have low tech, these alphabet boards, Shomita hasn't come to IICP. I hope someday I can show you all that. So we have these low-tech communication boards, which probably has alphabets. I'm talking of alphabet boards. And these are about AAC users who are readers, like you and me. So when the child is pointing out to say alphabet A, and then S, and then K. So when the child is pointing to A, as a communication partner, I am supposed to give a feedback to the child and say A. And he's pointing to S, and then say, oh, S, and then K. Oh, okay. Are you saying ask? Again, as I said, it's important for the child to know that this is what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah.
I'm hearing this from you. Is this what you're trying to tell me? Now, this is, of course, to do with somebody who's cognitively bright. But even somebody who has issues with intellectual difficulties, there again, the part of communication will not be saying it that, yeah, okay, yes, no, I was not saying this. No. But in some manner, will communicate to you that this is not what I was trying to say. So I could be giving, for example, ice cream to, for example, say Shomita, and who has cognitive difficulties. And Shomita wants to say no. And there's no way that she can say no. And she also doesn't know how to say no. But she will move her head away. She will push the ice cream away. So she has communicated no. So starting from there, every child has a right to know. And as
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks. And we move on to the other section where we will talk about cortical visual impairment. So just for our listeners who might not be aware of the term, please elaborate a bit on what is CVI or cortical visual impairment.
So cortical visual impairment is where the child sees the world like a swirling mass of colors. It is actually not the impairment in vision. The child is seeing like you and me, but because of a brain injury or a brain damage, is not interpreting it properly. Because I'm not being able to, my vision is fine. It's not that I can't see. I have myopia or something else. I can't interpret it.
Okay.
And it is a congenital issue. It's a congenital challenge.
And how different is it from color blindness?
Color blindness, I think, would be colors. But this is not just colors, no?
Okay.
It's not just colors. It's not that I can't see colors.
Yes.
In fact, we work on colors. With children with CVI, we actually work on colors. And so maybe I'll just like jump the gun. Is that we work on other things that we notice. So with children with CVI, and it's especially with children with cerebral palsy, have a lot of cortical visual impairment issues. So it's very interesting. When we see a toy, when a child sees a toy, what does the child do? Brings the toy close and holds it close, and then plays with it.
Yeah.
An apple or see something, whatever it is, looks at it, brings it close, and holds it, and does whatever. He puts it in his mouth or whatever he does. But with CVI, it's interesting. They will first feel the place, and they know there's something there happening. Usually toys which make sounds, and in an early intervention center or in a play group, you'll have toys which make sounds, right? So the child will be actually feeling and then going there and then looking towards it. And then well, there's an issue there. There's an issue happening there.
Right.
Okay. So that's what. Then they'll look at, of course, a kind of red flags. They'll look at a light, usually a tube light, a white light, actually. They'll look at a light for a long time. So these are kind of small signs that that this child has CVI. So it's, yeah.
Yeah. But MD, again, coming back to technology, in your opinion, how has modern technology helped this field in getting better to deal with these children or anyone who has CVI?
Okay, so modern technology, now CVI is something actually I first observed when I was in the Brit school. I said like, oh my God, Kristen Roman Lanzi is one of their, and they work a lot on CVI and how they have got it into the curriculum, which we are of course trying to do. It is just that we're not trained enough as yet. All of us are not trained enough as yet. So the first thing that I saw was the use of technology, actually, if I tell you. That the whiteboard, what do you call that? With one which the doctors use, where they put the X-ray plates and it's called a white light. What is it called? Is it called a white light? Which has a backlight.
Yeah. Got it. Yes. Yeah. The ultrasound reports and everything, they will put it there and see it.
And then you have the parent bringing things from home and putting it on the white light so that the child learns to see it. So the child can only see when the other clutter is not there. There's no other clutter happening.
Okay.
The room is dark. So we are trying to get the child to focus, right? The room is dark. Everything is dark. And you have either a black cloth or a black paper, or you have just that white light and you are trying to introduce objects to the child. How will the child play otherwise? So maybe the bowl which the child eats, maybe the glass which the child, and then of course you tell the parents to introduce white, depending on the color preference of the child. That again, an assessment will tell you, is it yellow, is it blue, is it green, is it red? and then you work on that. And then when you go to low tech, this is of course high tech. And now see again, since you will be talking of high tech or we're talking of technology, our phones have it. This backlight thing, our phones have it.
Right.
So it's kind of helpful. You also have magnification devices. So that pretty much works a lot. But then of course you can't have a high tech all the time. So you have to introduce that in terms of where the child is observing what. So for example, the child is, you want the child to look at, say, a toy or look at something, a written thing, a toy. And you have to have a black background. And then that has to be in a white, it has to have a white thing placed on a black background. And you choose the colors which the child has preference for. So if it is yellow, then you have this yellow fluorescent. I wish I could show you pictures. You have yellow fluorescent border to that. So the child focuses on that and observes it. Now, coming to speech, I had to mention this out here. In CVI, when you're assessing the child or when you want the child to learn, that comes later, you do not speak. See, with children, what do? You say, okay, this is your toy and look at this. You have special educators talking like that, or parents. And I think young mothers also, Shomita would be able to say this more. And you introduce a toy and you're actually talking about the toy, right? Because the child is already looking at the toy. So clearly you want to talk about the child toy more.
Yeah.
But with CVI, you will not be doing that because we don't even know if the child is looking at that beautiful toy which you bought for the child. So you are supposed to keep quiet and keep it on that white light. Or we use a lot of the phone, what do you call that? The torch of the phone, which is a white light again. Focus it on the toy in a dark room. And then you see the child looking at the toy at all. And then maybe later you give language to it. You say a bowl or a ball for you or something like that. So that's what.
Yeah, I have one question here. So with education and therapy, does the situation gets better, or is it like we can only learn a way, a work around it, and the problem stays as it is? So is there a way it can get better?
No, it gets better. Of course it gets better. Of course, completely it gets better. But it's, of course, a consistent work which has to be done. Because for the child to observe, and we have a lot of stimuli in our environment all the time, right? But here for this child who's struggling to even make sense of that toy and, or the thing that he's playing with or the thing that he's eating, we have to work on that. And then, of course, it will get better. I always believe, I'm against this entire thing of, will it get fixed? Or I'm not saying you're saying it, but I'm very against when people say, will it get fixed? When will my child become all right? Well, the child is
there is no point, no end line to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, of course it will. I have great faith in that, but it's a consistent effort one has to constantly do it.
Yeah.
And I want to know something from a societal perspective. Like if I'm a parent and unfortunately my child has this, how accessible or expensive are these visitations or treatments in South Asia for a middle class earning family?
Let me talk of IICP because IICP caters to and I'm very proud of that actually. Our reach is like deep down. It might not be upwards. As I said, we have issues with people coming to, but so we offer strategies which are very easy for the parent to afford. For example, a phone. And if you're talking of CVI, OT, or any of the things that we spoke about just now, we offer very simple suggestions, which we know is workable. That's the reason this multidisciplinary team, when it works, the social worker will tell you exactly what it is that the parent can afford. We actually have that entire thing there. We know their salary and their income and stuff like that. What is there in their house? What is the setup? So no point giving something to the parent which the parent can't afford. Like, really, how does it help them? But now, of course, as I said, with CVI, it's easy. Like, for example, now in this Disha school readiness program, we have this beautiful child, Anushri Haldar, and she's wearing glasses. And I used to keep wondering, why does she never look up? She's such beautiful eyes. Why does she never look up? She's wearing these glasses, and why? And then one day I just said, let me just try it and see, is there some issue happening with, there's so many toys. And I see her playing, with toys. She also probably has some sensory issues, but that hasn't been diagnosed. But she's playing with toys, but it's like, she just puts her hand, like brings them, and She's not exploring the toy. So what is happening? And then when we did this little assessment, we figured out, oh my God, like, she has some other big challenges happening. And then the parent was told that you have a black dupatta at home, a black stole at home. Just keep your room as much as you can, maybe not. She stays in like one room apartment or whatever, and just like maybe at night you can try when everybody goes off to sleep, and then maybe. So I think one can always work around these things, and that's the reason why the team approach is always necessary. Otherwise, as a special educator, I could be saying tons of things from the net, but it will not work if it doesn't work in the context where the child is coming.
One more thing from a society perspective, Ravi. As a parent, if I have a child with special needs, how does it impact the mental health of the parents? Have you seen any parent who's just kind of lost it? How do you provide counseling to these parents as well? What happens there?
Okay, so again, I'm getting back to the social workers role that we have. So of course, when the child comes to, see again, it's hard to imagine. I mean, you have a child, and and some children look, the impairments are visible. That's a challenge. And if you're young parent, it's a huge challenge. So I'm not even going there, because as a special educator, really, I keep telling this to the parents that I'm not in your shoes. So I could be saying tons of things, So of course, it's a huge thing. And the stigma part, again, I'm not even going there. The entire thing of, it happened because of some past sins. It happened because the mother, all that is there. And I would like to believe it's universal. In India, we hear it a lot more because we are always this entire thing of stigmatizing or the fear factor. I think people feel that works great with us. It doesn't. It silly doesn't. But it is it's very impactful for the young mother. Very impactful. But because in IICP, we have a very strong parent group. When I joined, this was, and it was such an eye-opener. And I think I've met the world's strongest moms in IICP, strongest, And I see this mom coming in the morning with this child with cerebral palsy and intellectual difficulties. I'm mentioning these terms now that I know, then I didn't know. And she's holding the child, and child is throwing his arms around and screaming, and this young beautiful looking mother walking with the child, of course she doesn't have a wheelchair at home. I'm sure she doesn't have access. Our roads are not that great that you have access to wheelchairs or buggies, and the mother is taking the child to the classroom, and then the teacher takes over and the child sits with others and listening to music, calming music, and all of it is happening. And the mother, she kind of wipes her tear, and she comes back and she sits in the parents' room where all the parents are sitting. And then they're knitting or they're stitching and they're planning their picnic and the next sari exhibition. I was gobsmacked. I said, it must be, what an empowered lot of mothers. Oh my God. It takes a lot. And then they all have their own little organizations that they make. They take their children out. So the social worker works a lot. And when you see again with parents, I think they're very simple people, basically, especially with a child with difficulty. Like, you are looking at anything that works for the child. So when they observe the special educators' work in the classroom, we have this entire parent intervention program called PIP, where the parent comes to the class and sees what the teacher is doing. And you are actually seeing that little progress in your child. I mean, depending on that, I'm talking of children who are, for them, the progress is, if I'm calling the child's name and the child is looking, starting from there to the child spelling actually big sentences, using tense markers and all of it. Then, of course, the parent feels emboldened. And you have an entire body like IICP who is there behind you. Like, what is it that you need? Is it at home? Do you need some intervention program? Is it the child going to school and there's an issue and the school is kind of saying no or yes or whatever it is? Because despite the Right to Education Act being there, we still don't have so many children with difficulties going to school, So, it's quite a thing for the parents. But as I said, I kind of salute all the moms that have seen my IICP. It's humongous.
No, carry
on. Next section is, we'll let you roll the board, Shamata.
Yep. Okay. I thought, yep. Anyway, I will just move on. So I think what I was going to ask has already been covered, like your suggestion to the parents, like what to do and how to act in the situation. And I know you already mentioned that like most of the people, they kind of the need of the hour, they start acting the way it's required. But do you have any suggestions for them?
No, I'll just get back to the part of the parents. So let me just mention about this child we were working with. This child goes to a mainstream school, and the parent came to us, and he has cerebral palsy, and of course he's ambulatory and all of it. But he had issues. I mean, when we had did an assessment with him, we realized that his functional writing, his writing would never be functional enough to be accepted by the board. I mean, of course, like all parents, I want my child to write ABCD. And I'm like, okay, you know what? He's writing 1 to 10. You'll hear this very often, right? And then when we introduced an alternate writing mode, as in the computer. So this child, when he was in nursery, or was it? No, it was in class 1. And he started taking his laptop to class. So along with the parent, I have to say the schools again really came up. Because we were persistent, but the school also saw through that here is this persistent mom, persistent dad, and the child again. See, coming from that point we were discussing, if you actually observe a child and you let the child say and do things or communicate things to you, you will see every child wants to really do their best. I want to do my best and make my teacher or my mother happy. Right? Like, we all want a bit of adulation, all of us. So the school really came up and did a lot. And here's this child who's going to appear for his class 10, actually, in the state board. We call it Madhumita board out here. So the entire fight is going on. So I think for parents, early intervention, the moment I think you see your child, you feel there's some difficulty happening and you're having some challenges, please go to an early intervention center. It's a kind of suggestion to all. Whenever you see it, it could be at 6 months, 3 months, it could be at, as I said, 10, 12, whenever you feel that, okay, you know what, I can't do anymore. I've done my best. Please go to a center. And I think what parents do is, as I said, again, I'm not in their shoes, so it's probably I'll be a little judgmental if I say this, but I still feel that instead of rushing to many places, stick to one, because it takes time, for the intervention program to set in, the child to feel, okay, there's something new happening to me, and then respond to it. Especially with our child who face challenges, it takes time. I know parents kind of start wondering when am I going to see it? Just like hang in there and have faith on the person you're having faith in, special educator, whoever is working with your child. So, yeah.
Yeah. And apart from the parents, there are like other people are also there in this equation, like extended family, relatives, or neighbors. So any words for them, like how to, like, I would say, behave in this situation? Because sometimes we keep pointing out things which we actually, no one needs us to wants us to do that, but we do that.
Give the child, your child, or your uncle's child, or your whoever's child, just observe him and you'll get the answers. Observe what they're trying to communicate to you. So if you're asking the child, example, if you're asking the child, what's your name? And the child is not saying, or like, say hello to uncle, and the child is not saying, okay, maybe you're saying, say hello to uncle, he's not been able to grasp it or understand it. It's a simple thing, I know. Uncle has come, whoever has come and say hello, and well, he hasn't said hello. It's okay. If he's allowed you to sit next to him and he's doing his own play and you're doing your own play, fair enough. And then, of course, as I said, if you need help, then try to follow the strategies or the intervention program. Of course, we work on an intervention program and we find out who else is there in the family, who is the child close to, and then maybe these are the things that the person needs to know. You know what I'm saying? There's something called social networks, where you figure out the child, Sarah Blackstone, I would say, but the child and how the child communicates with the family, with the friends, with teachers, with maybe the chauffeur of his car, with the gardener who comes to the house, all of it is a different way the child communicates. So if you observe that, and that's our job as special educators, social workers, as we're working, the suggestions that we give or the interventions that we plan, so like, please gel in with that. Please gel in with that, and let's not rush the child. The child is anyway having a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
So clearly, I personally feel it's our duty, because every child is saying something to us. If we don't understand, then let's figure out why we don't understand, because the child is saying something. So that's what I think. That's kind of essential. But yeah, I think modern technology has made things a lot easy for us. There's several things now available. I feel you have pictures, you have photographs. There's so many things available. Like for the CVI, there is wonderful multimedia videos, which I use a lot. I showed it to the parent. She thankfully has a smartphone. Again, that's something which I think the digital age has got. You have houses having smartphones, maybe one smartphone, but they have it. And I showed her videos, and which has these fruit recognition. I'm teaching the child fruit recognition. So in a dark video, and you have this calming music of Mozart, and those fruits are popping up and down on a black background. The child is watching it. And then, of course, you introduce the fruit, the real fruit on a black background. This is, of course, to do with CVI.
Right.
But I'm saying, I guess what special education has taught me, is step a little back and wait. Don't rush.
And
So that's an advice I would give to everybody.
Thank you, very valuable. Shomada, one question again. You spoke about family and immediate family support and understanding and empathizing with the child, right? We also know there's this prevalent yet subtle issue of sexual assault within the family, right?
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, these days it's becoming imperative that you teach your child normal coding words that only the mother can understand. But when a child is coming to you with special needs or CVI, do you guys have extra teaching methods whereby you make the little girl or the little boy understand that this is good touch, bad touch? How do you go about doing that?
Okay, so we have something called so as I said, again, getting back to the social worker, they do a lot on this. So there's something called Protection of Child Rights Act. It's an act.
Right.
They have a lot of these sessions which they have regularly with the children. They sit with the children. And you also have the special educator also chipping in, but it's pretty much the social worker does a lot of work on that. And of course, we have an IICP consultants who come to us, we have Dr. Ram and many other consultants who come to us. So then we have people who actually go and tell them what is the issue. But I have to say this, it's very interesting because again, we come from a culture where sex is, and we all know it, it's like pretty taboo, okay? So sexual abuse is again something we all know about, we feel very strongly against, but we don't know how to put it across to the parent. Yeah. So for example, I remember discussing this with one of my colleagues actually, and she, of course, she was meaning well, she was telling me about a parent who was telling about her teenager with disabilities who constantly watches porn. Now, and constantly watching porn. So I said, okay, but is it affecting his studies? What is happening? No, not that, but constantly when the child is free, is watching porn. So I said, what did you say? So that's why I was discussing with you. So I said, like any teenager, I mean, even older people do that. And in any case, it's very monitored anyway in our country, right? So this child who's sitting on a wheelchair, who is a teenager, what are you expecting the child to do? What are we giving the child? I mean, why would I expect every child to open up religious books or suddenly open up studies? There's something called like entertainment. Like, what are we giving? And this is a natural need for me to know what is happening with my body and what is happening with other bodies. So I think a lot of work is done by a social worker. And there's also the Ankur Advocacy Group. It's an advocacy group which we have of people with disabilities in our organization. They sit with the parent, they sit with the students to discuss. Now, it's a different thing that we discuss, but obviously coming back to the family structure, when they go back, that again is something which we have a long way to go, I mean, long way to go, long way to go. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's there in mainstream kids, that's a challenge anyway. So this is like, we have a long way to go.
Absolutely. Shomada, any more questions before we wrap up?
No, I think we are good.
I'm mindful of the time, MD, but before we let you go, this was a wonderful conversation. But if our listeners or any parents need to look out for you, where can they find you on social media?
I'm there on Instagram. I have to check the name of my handle though. Give me a minute, okay? It's, I think, Madhumita 1971.
Okay.
Okay, and on Facebook it's Madhumita Dasgupta. LinkedIn I'm there as again Madhumita Dasgupta, but I don't update or upgrade my work all the time. So that's there.
Happens to all.
I was very happy to talk to anybody who would need anything else that I can help with.
We will be posting IICP's link and your links under the comment section of our audio as well. For any parent or any individual who feels that they need to reach out, please let us know. Please reach out to Madhumita as well. So to all our listeners and audiences, so this was Ms. Dasgupta all the way from Kolkata talking about speech impairment, special education, cortical visual impairment, and so much more. And I'm hoping that those of you who've heard us for the first time, you've got a lot to take away, whether you're a parent or someone who's been affected by these things. Please don't feel bogged down. Remember what Madhumita said, there's always help available. You just need to reach out. And those of you who've heard us for a while, I really hope that you've liked what we produce on the table as content. If you've got any thoughts, criticism, feedback even, please write to us at coconutchats@gmail.com. We're also available on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as Coconut Chats, always looking out for your messages and responses. Till then, it's a crazy world we're living in. Please take care and stay safe. And Andy, thank you so much for joining us again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks a ton. Thanks a huge ton.